fish on. That's a gilly. Gilly on the recon. Pretty one. Look at this right here. Look at this right here, guys. So, welcome back to the Googan Lab. Today we're going to be talking about marina dock areas and the bluegill that hang around these things pretty much year round, and how to imitate these bluegill, because big bass love to eat bluegill. So even though that it's really hot outside and everyone thinks about bass going deep in the summer, and which is true, you get a lot of fish that chase shad, they're moving to that cooler, deeper water. You're always going to have bass that hang around structures like this, even when it's 100 degrees outside. That water's in the 80s. You've got these sunfish, these bluegill, that hang around these docks. And bass are in the same family. They're sunfishes as well. But bluegill are, they like to hang around structure like this. So if it's, you know, trees or whatever, docks just provide that shade. They provide little microorganisms living on the algae, little things that they can eat. You know, if you've got a lot of people that visit the lake, you've got people throwing bread and stuff like that in the water, and the bluegill will just hang around those areas, and usually you will find them in the dark, shadowy spots underneath floats, around cables, walkways, anything like that that's going to have some cover and maybe some shade for them. One of my favorite ways to target bass when there's a lot of bluegill around like that is a jig. And a jig represents bluegill really well. I like to go with some sort of natural color. This is a juicy jig right here, and it's a casting style jig. So you can skip this, you can flip this, you can even swim it if you want to. And then I like to throw a plastic on there that has some sort of purple or blue in it. Green pumpkin with blue fleck, like this Okeechobee craw, is really good. Something that's got some purple in it that represents that bluegill. Bluegill have like a little purpley blue in them, so this represents it really well. And so what you want to do is target those same areas where you're either seeing bluegill, and I always carry a crappie rod or something like that where I can throw out and see if there's bluegill in there as well. You can use your electronics, obviously. If you don't have that though, you can just take another rod, see if there's bluegill hanging around there. And with a jig, I like to just pitch it out in those dark spot areas, and I'll let it sink down. And sometimes I'll go with a 3/4 if I think the bass are just under the surface. This water's very deep and clear here, so they're a little bit deeper. I'm using a 3/4 right now. And I'm gonna hit cables, I'm gonna hit any kind of cover that I see that's under the water, or if I see it on my graph, I'm gonna let the jig make contact or just free fall. Sometimes you can just get those bites where it's falling. And a bluegill, when it gets defensive, will flare out. It'll flare its gills out, it'll flare its spines out. It makes itself look bigger than what it actually is. And a jig with the skirt, when you pause it or move it, that skirt will move, undulate, and it looks like those bluegill that get that defensive flare out of their spines and their gills. So that's sometimes how you get that reaction bite on the jig. So another technique that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, that is just a deadly way to catch bass around these marina structures that have bluegill, is a wacky rig. So this sinks really slow. It's a lot slower than a jig, and it's gonna get those bass that are hanging just a few feet down. And the great thing about this is you can skip this really well. This bait will just skip across the surface. So on a spinning setup like this, you can get it in those dark little corners where those bass are going to be hanging as well. Now the last thing, if you're trying to go for grandma, is to put a good size swim bait on. And there's a lot of different bluegill style swim baits out there. You can do a soft body, there's hard bodies as well, but just something that is huge and basically has some drawing power to get old grandma to come out from under that dock. And the way you fish this is you just want to throw it down the edges of those shade lines where those bluegill are hanging, and you just slowly reel it. And you may not get a lot of bites, but if you do, it's gonna be a mondo. So don't forget about the bluegill that are hanging around these docks and marina structures summer and honestly other times of year too. It's fantastic. It's a year-round area, and bluegill are always going to be a forage source for bass. So try those tricks, and if you want to see more tips, stay tuned right here at the Googan Lab. Subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.